E.T. phone home.
That worked nice. That's great.
Well, I feel about today much the same way I felt about it in 1982, which is that it's just a little piece of wonderment in my life. This little guy came into my life and then everybody else's and kind of did his magic. And I feel very beholden to him. I owe a lot to this creature from another world.
It'll be sadder if it's happy sad. You know what I'm saying?
And I also feel like I made my most personal film in 1982 with E.T. And to this day, I think it remains my most personal film.
I'm keeping him.
Elliot.
What's happening? Oh no.
All right, let's see the line advancing a little bit. That's fine.
All the kids in the movie are combinations of myself and my own family growing up. I had the idea when I was actually a kid, starting to make movies, wondering how to fill the needs that all young, lonely kids have growing up. And instead of filling the need with a terrestrial family member, I fill the need with an imaginary creature from outer space. And I think E.T. was really about the divorce of my parents. Mary's husband, Elliot's father, is in Mexico with Sally.
Where's Mexico?
At the time when I did the press junket and met all the reporters and talked about the movie, I never once said this was inspired by the divorce of my parents. But it always had been in the back of my mind to someday be able to just come out and confess that, which I think I did about 10 years ago in an interview. I finally came out and said, well, look, it's really based on that. I had been living with the story for so many years. I remember that when I made Close Encounters, and I had been living with the story of E.T. before Close Encounters, I had been involved and very preoccupied with extraterrestrial possibilities. And I remember when Richard Dreyfuss walked into the mothership, it made me sad, but not that sad. But when the little E.T. we called Puck, who Carlo Rambaldi also designed and built, when he returned to the mothership, I was really sad. I wanted that guy to stay back on Earth. And I thought, wow, there's a powerful story there. So that just continued to feed my thinking about, I really want to continue. I know I have another story in me, and I always knew I didn't know it was going to be called E.T., but it was always going to be about a boy who finds an alien. I had that story from childhood in my brain. And I pretty much had a lot of it worked out when I asked Melissa to write it. We were making Raiders of the Lost Ark. I was in Tunisia at the time. I was in the desert, and it was between shots, and I was picking up seashells, because once the desert was the bottom of an ocean, so there's all these prehistoric seashells where I was collecting them. And I was just talking to Melissa, and I was telling her the story of E.T., and I had loved Black Stallion, which she had co-authored. And I said, Melissa, you would be so great. And Melissa at first turned me down. She said, I'm not a writer. I'm down on myself this month about writing. And she didn't want to do it. So we all worked on her. Kathy Kennedy worked on her. I worked on her until finally she relented and said, okay, I'll write it.
We determined that it would be a family with an absentee father. There would be a separation, so there would be the poignancy of that situation in the house, that the little man would somehow fill a spot he didn't know he was filling. We had to know who Elliot was specifically. And what surprised us is knowing that we needed to determine who E.T. was, because he was a character more than just a presence or a surprise or a visitation. He was a guy. So we developed his character. We developed what he would look like.
Ouch.
Healing was something that came up pretty early. Actually, I remember that I asked kids what superpower they would want, either to have themselves or to have this man from outer space have. And healing came up a lot, that he could take care of hurts. We did know he was a farmer. He's an agricultural worker. He's a drone. You know, he's out collecting, but their affinity was to plant life. So then we sort of thought there had to be sort of a squishy, earthy, muddy kind of feeling about him. Personally, I never imagined what his planet looked like. It was just that he was out to collect foliage, bring home the seeds.
Come on, hurry up.
Don't be pushy.
The dynamic of the trio was really important and successful, I think. Knew Elliot had to be a middle child. So certainly, older brother is kind of obvious, and the younger sister. I can't remember how this was decided. But in my life, I had always been a big babysitter, and there were many children in my life, even before I had my own. My husband had 2 children who were the ages of the boys. So there was a lot of eavesdropping and stealing and lifting. I would work for 4 or 5 days, and then I would go meet with Stephen, and we'd go over what I had, and I'd go back, and I'd fix it, change it, move on, have another 5 days in, go back, we'd go over it and over it and over it. Probably for an original screenplay, that's very unusual to have that kind of collaboration going on as you're working. It was smooth and fast. It's never happened that easily again. It was 8 weeks, and it just flew by.
And I read the screenplay. Kathy Kennedy was there, and I came running into the dining room, and I said, I just read E.T. We're making it now. I said, this is great.
Okay. All right, so now we start right with the temperature one.
She only really did a first draft for me. I pretty much shot a first draft. There were revisions, but they were kind of revisions that she'd do on the set or on the, you know. It was inspired work on Melissa's part, and it was ready to shoot the day I read the script.
I like to try to get this shot here before we break. Action!
Elliot, look what I made for you!
I was 6, and I was just incredibly aware at that time. I feel like I remember everything as if it was yesterday. I met with Stephen on Poltergeist, but he thought that I was more right for E.T., so it was, there was nothing wrong with that in my mind. I thought, okay, great. I'm glad to know you think I'm more right for something.
A little bit to your left, Drew. A little bit to your left. Right there. Look at him.
Drew was the first person I hired on the movie, and I had met a lot of possible Gerties. But when Drew came in and began to tell me that she was a punk rock and roll band leader, she's 6 years old, and she's telling me she has a punk band, and that she makes up her face with paint, and thousands of people flock to her concerts.
I told him I had a band called the Purple People Eaters. It was a punk rock band, and I was the drummer. It was, early 80s, late 70s. Punk rock was really big then, so I was incredibly into it and thought it was super cool to be in a punk rock band. And he just empowered me to believe that, sure, if I wanted to be in a punk rock band, I could certainly be in a punk rock band. And that's sort of, I think, what every person on this planet needs, is someone to help them realize their dreams and help them find their destiny and to believe in them and to make you feel like you could reach your potential.
And then your mouth gets bigger, and scream.
I said, I could use that imagination in this picture. She could help me make my movie better. I thought she was one of the most remarkable children I had ever met. And I immediately, hired her.
He's really real.
Then
Why are all those wires? Those aren't wires, those are his feet.
Valenzuela here. Valenzuela.
Henry's screen test was a revelation for me, because I was about at the end of my rope. I could not find Elliot. Jack Fisk, Sissy Spacek's husband, had just worked with Henry, and they cobbled together a few scenes in 35 millimeter and showed me Henry. I loved the way Henry looked. I couldn't tell about his acting because the scenes were very visual, but I wanted to just see what he would be like, saying a lot of dialogue, and so I brought him in to meet me.
Yeah. Henry? Great. You okay?
Yeah.
That was terrific. What?
I met Stephen when I was 9 years old. I had come out to LA for the first time. I was from San Antonio, Texas. That's where I was living. And I came out to Universal and had an audition.
And I said, let's make something up. Let's do an improvisation.
There's a knock on your door and a man comes in, a grown man, not your brother. And he's from NASA.
I just said that you have a best friend, And this is a creature. It's the best creature friend. And there is a man that's going to come in to your house, and he's going to be from the government, and he's going to try to get you to give this friend of yours back to him. And Henry, whatever you have to do, you stop him.
Now, young man, I understand that you have an alien somewhere in this house. Is that true?
And Mike Fenton, the casting director, played the government man.
Well, is it true?
Can't take him.
Well, I'm afraid I have to, son.
Can't take him away, he's mine!
But it's not my choice. The president asked me to come here and get him.
I don't care what the president says, he's my best friend! And you can't take him away!
And I got the part. It was the fastest auditioning process I've ever been on.
Okay, kid, you got the job. And action.
Michael! Get the bikes. Meet us at the playground at the top of the hill.
I was doing a play in New York off Broadway. A lot of people were seeing it and having me come in and read for other projects. And one of them was a movie called The Entity. And I went in for that, and I didn't get the part in that. And the casting director, she said, well, you know, I'm really sorry that you didn't get this, but I hear that Spielberg is casting something that you might be right for. They arranged an interview, which was the day that President Reagan was shot. And so it was kind of hectic, the audition, because it wasn't even an audition, it was just a meeting with Spielberg. And I went in, and I was just starry-eyed because Close Encounters was my favorite all-time movie, and I was starstruck, and all this stuff was going on with the shooting. And then I sat down with him, and I felt instantly comfortable, and he made me feel relaxed. He asked me what my interests were, and I said, well, I like bike riding. And he said, that's in the movie. And then I said, I like Dungeons and Dragons, and he goes, well, that's in the movie too. They had me back for several other auditions with other people that were trying out for Elliot and some of the other parts. He didn't say, kid, you got the part to me, but later, you know, they had me back in, and I got the part.
I know what you should do. Let's do it with the window up. Okay. And that'll help you shout more, you know what I mean?
Robert was sort of the typical teenager, you know, in the picture. You know, he was always torturing and teasing his brother, the way I'm certainly, you know, guilty as charged of teasing my sisters growing up.
How you feeling, faker?
I'm feeling fine. Look.
So I put a lot of myself into Robert's character. I put myself in all the characters, but I remember specifically Robert, you know, where the hand comes in. And
He came back? Oh, my God!
that stuff that I did to my sisters to just make them nuts when I was growing up. And it was fun to let Robert be a bit of my alter ego. And he was the oldest. Excellent. But Elliot was the wisest.
Swear as my only brother on our lives.
Don't get so heavy, I swear.
You know, I like all the Tex Avery cartoons where you don't really see the adults except from the knees down. And yet I didn't want to make the adults' cartoons in E.T. I simply did not want to show their faces except for Mary.
This is no room. This is an accident.
You know, Mary being, you know, Dee Wallace, who did an amazing job, because in a way she was a kid too. I always thought that Mary was a kid too. She was suffering a divorce, and that kind of reduces you to childhood impulses and choices, because your emotions take over from your roles as a caregiver and a parent.
He saw me playing a call girl on an episode of Skag, which was a series with Carl Malden. But Stephen hires essences. He saw the essence, the heart of the character that he wanted. Do you believe in fairies? Say quick that you believe.
I do.
If you believe, clap your hands. I knew after the first read, I called my agent, and my exact words were, this film could change the world. I knew. I always knew. I don't know why anybody else didn't know. I did. I mean, I don't think you ever know that the public is going to embrace a film like they did E.T., but I certainly knew that as far as the script was concerned, the possibilities were all there.
The first time you see another adult, the face of another adult, is when Keyes walks into a close-up and he's inside the protective clothing. And that's when you see the adult world starting to consume the world of children.
If there's no response to 20 per kilo, let's move to hypertonic saline.
Mike Fenton was the casting agent, and he was a fan of mine, and he believed that I was destined for great things. And one day he called me up and he said, do you have a fedora, you know, a kind of Dick Tracy hat? He said, grab it, and I want you to come audition for Steven Spielberg for a new movie he's doing. And he was auditioning for Raiders of the Lost Ark. I was outside, and Steven was in a room kind of like this, surrounded by these light stands and curtains. And Mike said, just stand behind the curtains, and I'll introduce you, and you step in. I cocked my hat, and I flipped my jacket collar up, and Mike said, Steven, I want you to meet Peter Coyote. And I stepped in, and your audience can't see, but all these big light stands have these long, angled legs that stick out. And I walked just like this, and I tripped over one of these legs, and I came careening into the room, stumbling and falling over. Could not be the farther away from an action hero. And Steven was sitting down kind of looking at me like, why is this guy here? What is he doing here? But I guess we talked, and I guess he remembered something of me, and then I was told he also saw me in Southern Comfort. And the next thing I knew, I got a call for E.T. You know, I'm only seen from the waist down for half of it. I got a letter from an old girlfriend who said, I recognized you the moment you came on screen. I read the script. They sent a messenger up. I'd never had that experience, and he sat in my living room while I read the script, and then he took it and he went back. And I got it. But his being here is a miracle, Elliot.
I knew what it was saying, I knew what it was about, and I wanted to be in it. Of course, I knew Steven Spielberg, and I just have always felt that when great directors call you, you just gamble with them. You know, you just, if they're going to jump off a cliff, you jump off the cliff. And I felt that way about Spielberg.
E.T., can you say that? Can you say E.T.? E.T.
E.T.
It was tough finding a good look for E.T. because I wanted E.T. to be special. I didn't want him to look like aliens from other movies. I wanted him to look so anatomically different that the audience would say there's no way there's a person in a suit with a zipper up the back. And that's why I wanted to make the neck very, very slender and very long. I wanted people to say, oh my God, there's nobody in that.
At the beginning, we tried a whole bunch of different kinds of things. We tried a bunch of different kinds of heads.
And I began working first with Ed Verreau. And Ed did a lot of sketches of E.T., a couple of which are pretty interesting precursors to what Carlo Rambaldi came up with. I brought Carlo on board because Carlo had worked with me on Close Encounters, and he began to work on E.T. in clay.
I watched this picture back to me, the neck and the face. This paint was in the Academy of Fine Art in Bologna, in Italy. I realized that maybe it is a good idea, very original for extraterrestrial. Small neck and face protruding head. I made 3 little models in clay with little different anatomical points. One skin, one little fat, another, etc. With different dimension of the face.
And I refined it until it was something that I wanted, something that I could relate to, something that only a mother could love.
Steve came many times in my shop for see the model in real size. And I have just 3 months time for finish everything.
My fear was the audience would never love E.T. because he was so off-putting, the way he looked. And my hope was that they would love him within 15 minutes of meeting him. I expected, because I designed the film this way, for him to be scary when we first meet him. But as Elliot slowly starts to understand that there's no threat here, and that E.T. is the most magnificent curiosity of his young life, I would hope the audience also would be breathing the same kind of life into E.T. from their own points of view. And they did, and that's what was important. E.T. wasn't cute.
Elliot, look what I made for you.
And Michael screams. Say no to Michael.
No!
The whole premise of the film hinged upon that believability.
Cut. Great. Beautiful.
And that's why it was so important for Steven to really get the look down for E.T., get the design down to where people could believe that it wasn't just a guy in a suit. That's why the eyes were so important, and why we did a lot of takes of E.T. enunciating the words correctly with 12 guys working in unison.
E.T. phone home.
Faster.
E.T. phone home.
E.T. phone home.
If we had a pile of rubber there, you know, just pulsating and blinking a lot, and I wasn't emoting anything, it wouldn't have worked.
A real concern was just how much of E.T. do you see, particularly at the beginning. We're barely going to see him at all. That he'd stay very much in the dark. He would have a backlight. There would be something that would just give a reflection in his eyes and a little bit of shape to his face. Every scene started with the same question: where's he going to be? Because the mechanical E.T., he'd have to be anchored to the floor. Our sets were all raised on a structure so that the cables could be snaked around out of the set without having to cross the floor, so that we would literally have a hole drilled. E.T. would go in that, the cables would run out and go to the operators. And the operators viewed E.T. most of the time via remote video cameras, so they could see what he was doing. And their sense of synchronization had to be so perfect.
It was never a thing to me. It was never a machine to me. It was E.T. There was a soul there. That's the only way I can explain it.
Look way up. Way up. Okay, now look down at the remote control. Look at the remote control. Good. Taste it.
I think Stephen, all of his efforts to keep the people that controlled E.T. off the set, you know, the wires were hidden, they were behind, so you never were really cognizant of people running E.T. It was just E.T. being. And I think that helped all of us.
Okay, here we go.
No,
okay. Please.
Okay, stand by.
Where's my
right here.
voice of RCA?
I had to figure out ahead of time when I was going to use the little people, when Caprice was going to use her hands and mime, and when I was going to use the fully mechanized character. I had to work that out ahead of time because it took a lot of time putting everybody in the suits. And then we had a young boy who didn't have legs, and he walked on his hands, and he gave E.T. the most amazing life. And when we used him primarily when E.T. had had a few too many and was stumbling around the kitchen.
Fall forward. Cut. Okay. Now.
Sheerly by walking on his hands. He gave E.T. an amazingly out-of-this-world walk rhythm. And Tammy and Pat Bylon, you know, did some amazing work in the E.T. suits. And they were troopers because they were sweating in there. And they had to carry a lot of, especially when we were using the electronic head, that was 12, 15 pounds on Tammy and Pat's own heads. And that was very, very hard to do. And we had to give them frequent rests, but they stuck with it to the very end and they made it happen.
I need you to pretend that it's nothing more than an animal. It's some sort of a deformed cross between a coyote and a rabbit. All of a sudden it's showing great intelligence. And that cracks you up.
Henry, he'd already done quite a bit of work with the E.T., and so I kept asking him, you know, how does it work? What does the neck do? I know that, you know, have you seen the heart light up yet? And he wasn't telling me a whole lot, and he was saying, you know, you'll see. And I think it might have been on purpose, but that first scene that I see him in was the actual first time I saw the creature. And this thing comes out, and it was just unbelievably real. I mean, there's no way to describe how magical it was to have something that alien, that bizarre, actually working with you. That was just invaluable because it would react to things we were saying, and we could react to its reactions, and it was just like working with another actor.
In the closet, fast!
E.T. was absolutely real to me. I understood that it took mechanics and some people being in his suit and a woman doing his hands to make him manifest and come alive, but I just thought that he was a guardian angel, very real to me, and a good friend and someone who was teaching me a lot about love and how to take care of someone and how to treat people. And because he was there, because he wasn't computer generated, I mean, he was a very real, tangible being. And that's something that, you know, in this day and age in our technology, we don't have that luxury anymore of being so intimate with, you know, an alien, so to speak. And that makes him all the more real.
Picture Monday and I haven't used this one yet. Ever since then, I've just given up.
You saw people coming over and powdering his face and adjusting the wig when he was dressed as the old bag lady, and you saw, you know, E.T. being treated with respect and dignity. You know, I think the entire crew did give E.T. his dignity.